Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode of Celestia On Air, Deciphering STEM, the official podcast of said Celestia, which is the astronomy, astrophysics, and space tech club of BITS Goa. We are your hosts, Prateek,
Sumaran.
and today we have Pranav Sharma with us. Pranav is an astronomer and a communicator of science. He is the founder of Yash Pal Centre for Science and Technology, as well as the curator of the Space Museum at PM Birla Space Centre, Hyderabad, India. It's a pleasure to have you with us, sir.
Thank you, Prateek.
So, in today's session, it's going to be about you and your journey throughout the field of astrophysics. And so, let's just dive into the questions that we have for today.
Yeah,
So,
please.
many people with an interest and good knowledge base in astronomy and astrophysics contribute directly to the research. But when you analyze the general understanding about this subject, it's mostly limited to the names of planets, etc., among the people, right? And sometimes people even end up confusing astrology and stuff like that with astronomy. So, research papers, despite being very informative, aren't a good way of conveying knowledge to the general masses. However, through museums and science centers, you directly reach out to the people and educate them. So, my question to you is what fueled you to undertake such noble ventures at such a young age, apart from your contributions in the research world?
What is the use of science if we're not able to make our fellows understand it? So I think I would fairly give the credit to the mentors that I've had as a child, be it Yash Pal, be it Biman Basu, Ratnashri, or other people that I interacted with, I met with. They were nice influences actually. So I saw these great scientists who were doing good work in their research areas, but at the same time, they were making people understand science, and I think that is also very fundamental to the Indian nationhood. If we look at, we have enshrined the necessity of a scientific temper, the inquiry, the ideas of reform in our constitution. Our country was imagined as a scientific country. So I think that is where I think I began uh, teaching science.
I mean, it's truly great that you chose to educate people like us who are also interested rather than only contributing to research. So now
No, I mean,
it's like
I
us who are interested.
it's not education, it is interaction. It's very interesting interaction, and I trust me when I say this. You people would know much more than I do, and you would have better understanding because the kind of background that I have, the kind of times that I grew up in, and the kind of tools that I had were different than yours. And I mean, we got to know about data and data dialogues, as I usually jokingly say, for that's the term that I use for algorithms. So we got to know it much later, and I think you guys were doing it in school, so you were like far more competent and
There's certainly a generational gap. I mean, there's no denying that. I just hope that we can make use of it and develop it further.
well,
So
I have hope.
let's
So,
yeah. So let's dive into a rather interesting topic. What are
uh-huh.
your thoughts on the birth and death in the universe?
Oh, that's interesting. Birth and death are the essential elements of the universe. They are the necessary conditions. Let's look at let's look at it a little philosophically. For me and you to have this conversation, first you have to exist. Then the environment has to exist for you to exist. For the environment, the cities have to exist, the generations, the past generations have to exist, then the planet have to exist, the solar system has to exist. So this existence cycle goes back to the fundamental fact that something has to be born for us to have a discussion on its birth. The origin has to happen. So origin is a necessary condition, right? I mean, we're having a conversation. Like, don't please feel free to interrupt me or correct me if I
Yeah.
go wrong.
Yeah.
So birth becomes a necessary condition. Now that birth happens, the cycle has to complete. Why the cycle has to complete? Any ideas? Pratik, you can unmute your mic. We can have a discussion here.
Yeah. So not
So I'm
really.
going to ask good questions. So when I used to, teach a few classes back in the day in Hyderabad. So my classes used to look like a lot of questions.
True.
So today I think we are going to do the same exercise. But my on a very serious note, my question is, if birth becomes a necessary condition, then why death has to exist in the universe? Be it material, be it non-material.
So that the total energy in the universe remains constant. Like if
Well,
energy is created, it has to be destroyed.
yes, that is one way of looking at it. What else? What else can you think? Look at it this way. What is the law of entropy?
Entropy in the universe is constantly increasing.
Absolutely right. And what does that mean?
So everything moves towards disorder, and being born is a sort of order, I guess, and it has to end at some point and go back to being
That
disorder.
is fine. I mean, we're looking at closed cosmological model, of course, but we come back to entropy. When we say that the entropy in the universe is increasing, what does it mean?
The disorder and the randomness is increasing.
Yes. And what does it lead to?
More chaos, expansion.
Exactly. So if you have a consolidated structure, it would end up in a dissipated structure or a non-structure, right? So if you mark birth as the creation of the structure, then the universe necessitates itself a condition wherein the structure gets destroyed. So if you look at it in a way of, say, we use structure as a motive, then you see the creation of a structure is birth in the universe, be it a star, be it a planet, be it a planetoid, be it a planet. As may it a galaxy or any large scale structure formation. And when you see these structures dissipating, when you see these structures become non-structures, then the death happens. For example, the creation of a star is basically gravitational collapse of the of matter. The interstellar medium, the gas, the molecular clouds, and they come together. They form a colloid, and then there is a gravitational collapse. When collapse happens, the heat increases. There's a nuclear fusion which starts. It starts spinning about its own axis. It starts clearing the disk in which it's formed. It creates a star system by itself. Then it exists in a certain area in the universe, the birth of a star. And when that start and then so this is a creation of system, a creation of structure. becomes the birth of the star or the birth of the solar system. And when you see that star, the envelope starts increasing. There's an internal pressure. Then the star expands. For example, you look at, say, a typical main sequence star or a normal star that we see in the universe. Then what you see is you see that it expands, and then perhaps it explodes into a non-structure, which was different from the previous structure. So you call that a death of star. And then you have, the remnants. The remnants can be, the neutron stars, the dwarfs, the black holes. They are the remnants. So remnants are basically different structures than you have previously, or a non-structure. Or a non-structure, you can call it a nebula. It's still a structure, but a non-structure in comparison to the star structure that you had previously. Am I making sense?
Yes, sir. Actually, we just had a session about the birth and death of stars yesterday, so this is like a really good refresh.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, that
think
was
my thoughts.
yeah.
I look at birth and death of the universe in terms of structures, and that also helps me understand the universe a little better, if not smarter, but yes, certainly a little better, in a sense that I look at these structures as motifs, and I see how these motifs evolve eventually. For example, when you look at the birth of the universe, you have a really hot, dense plasma, and then you have the creation of the first stars. The first stars, they form a system, then they form the first galaxies. The first galaxies form first galactic structures, then the black holes are formed eventually. And then you see these black holes evolving in the disk of the galactic structure. They assimilating at the center of the galaxy, forming something of the order of 10 to the power 7 to much larger solar masses called the supermassive black hole. So all of that is structure evolution. And then you see the devolution of these structures when you see the death of stars. For example, in the same plane wherein a star is being born, a star collapses, or there's no ignition, so there's a deformed star called the brown dwarf, or they collapse further and they go into that trap of collapsing, and they form what we call a black hole. So it's also a structure evolution.
So, speaking of black holes, your major area of study includes black hole binaries. Now, what
Yeah,
got you interested in them, and how did you pick that up as your field of study?
it's a very interesting story. That's a really, really interesting story. So I met my professor and collaborator, Shantanu Basu, at a FICCI higher education meeting in 2012 in New Delhi. How we became friends, that's a very interesting story. We were looking for an auto for him to reach CR Park. And we were walking on Lodi Road and talking about his research, because I had read his work on brown dwarfs. I was in college that time. So then we kept in touch. I got a position with him in 2015. I went to London, Ontario to work with him. First day, I reach, and I quote what Shantanu said. He said, and I had no first-hand experience in research. I mean, I had been reading a lot, but if you look at the, formal research background, I didn't have it. So I mean, after the first group meeting, I asked, "What do you want me to look into?" He says, think of yourself as an explorer in a library. So you are in a library, you are looking for one statement which is beautiful. That makes sense, very poetic. Doesn't sound like very scientific, but I think I can do with that. The what I was working on that time was something called a hot Jupiter problem. So a hot Jupiter problem is basically you see these. When the star is formed, you see gaseous planets form at a certain distance. So in closer in the disk, you have the terrestrial planets, and farther in the disk you have gaseous planets. Uh, and what you see in certain star systems is these Jupiter-sized planets in orbits very close to the star. For example, imagine you have a star structure. We have 2 to 3 Jupiter-like planets in the orbits of, say, Mercury, Earth, and Jupiter. We're working on that. So there's something called a Lidov-Kozai mechanism by which they get into a certain orbit, which is, I mean, you've read it already. I mean, it's a technical name for it. It's classic 3-body problem. It's a very Newtonian 3-body problem. So I mean, then we had this meeting, and then from in the meeting, Shantanu says, what if? And Shantanu has this brilliant uh, way of investigating astronomy. So he likes to think out loud, and his students also think out loud with him. So he's just sitting in this chair, sipping coffee, and says, "What if we replace these Jupiters, hot Jupiters, and say that the star is a supermassive black hole, and these hot Jupiters are stellar mass black holes." And this is, mind you, happening before the gravitational waves were confirmed. So there was a huge excitement about black holes, because these are the things that actually cause gravitational waves. Then there was our colleague who believed that the gravitational waves don't exist. And he was working, let me see, Daniel Kahneman. Yeah, he wrote a book which was something of a phenomenon in 2015. It's called Traveling at the Speed of Thought. Very interesting book. And Daniel used to be a collaborator of a friend. And they say that Einstein miscalculated and gravitational waves don't exist. So we had a very interesting academic, I would not call it a fight, but I would certainly call it a dialogue, which led to some very interestingly heated arguments and a game of ping pong. Then we started working on black hole binaries, and I did a huge report on it as a part of my work at Western. And I came back, I worked a lot on it, and then we started working, me and Shantanu, we started working on a book. So you will see that there's a decent mention of this in the Stellar Remnants chapter of book that fortunately is coming out this year in September. I suppose it's being published by CRC. So, and the other reason why I got interested in black hole binaries is these are very rare, also extremely violent events in the universe. And the signatures are, brilliant, and they exist in different spectrums. For example, you will have gravitational waves coming out of either, if a black hole gets a slingshot and gets out of the system, you'll see something. You'll have high energy signatures at the same time as well. So very beautiful phenomena in the universe. And I'm letting a secret out if you're interested. It was very cool also, It's a nice icebreaker. So what do you study, Pranav? Well, I study black holes, and there you have something.
Yeah. So, in fact, black holes are so complicated. And when LIGO detected confirmed the first gravitational waves, to be precise, in somewhere around late 2015, there was a huge buzz about, black holes, and which was again revived in
They
2019.
detected in 2015. It was September 20. They confirmed it in 2016. I remember it because we were in Delhi. We had a meeting in India on astronomy. And this friend of ours who did not believe in gravitational waves was there, and we took him out to celebrate it.
That must have been fun.
If I'm not wrong, it should be, I think, the 13th or the 14th of February 2016. Yeah, we do these things,
Yeah, vindication. So, and as you mentioned, that you were working on a book, which is an interesting fact. So, Pranav is currently working on a book called Into the World of Neutrinos, which is in preparation as we speak. So, I'd like to ask you, is there anything specific that you'd like to mention about it? And what should a reader expect from it?
Into the universe, into the world of neutrinos is another very interesting book. So when I finished working with this book, it's a textbook on astronomy that me and Shantanu wrote. It is very wide. But at the same time, in 2019, I got an opportunity to work with Professor Takaki Kajita, who discovered the atmospheric neutrinos. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for it in 2015. And I had a nice visiting fellowship at the Institute of Cosmic Ray Research in Japan. We interacted a lot. So he wrote a book on neutrinos in Japanese. So this book basically started as a project to translate his Japanese work into English. And mind you, I don't know Japanese. So I asked a friend to actually get a translated work done. So I got a translated work. And I had previously read Frank Close's book on neutrinos. And much earlier work also. Something that happened here in India in TIFR. So I thought, just cannot be Professor Kajita's book's translation. It needs to be a different character. So we had a discussion. So I started adding some very interesting structures to the book. So what you would see eventually in that book is a lot of history of science, the history of discovery of neutrinos. You will see a character sketch of Pauli as a stalwart figure, but also I'm very insecure about his results and his ideas. And at the same time, you will see the development of different experiments, different ideas. So it's a very interesting amalgamation, if I may say so, of theoretical physics, experimental physics, history of physics, and the history of ideas itself. And I'm extremely glad that I got an opportunity to write a book with Professor Kajita. And I think it is one of the highlights of my career.
Well, I'm sure we can't wait for this book to be here. I'm sure we're also going to learn a lot from it once we read it. So we got to know that you had plans regarding 4 science museums in Odisha, Maharashtra, and in Telangana as well. We'd like to know what the current progress of those are.
Odisha, it's in plan. It's going slow, but I'm sure that it will happen. Telangana, we are planning to do a museum of future, for which we had a very strong interest from the central government and from the cultural secretary himself, which is good. Mr. Prashant Lahuti is in charge of the project. So we are planning to make a good museum of future in Hyderabad. Also in Ratnagiri, the museum it's a science museum, but it would be curated in a very different with a very different idea, wherein instead of focusing on the facts, in Ratnagiri we are focusing on the narrative. So it is a nice experiment, and it will also have a lot of poets actually writing prose works on science, which would be used as display material and explanatory notes to different things.
I mean, I personally love science museums so much. It used to be my favorite field trip in school, so I'm genuinely excited for this. I can't wait.
Yeah, and in addition to this, we are so I'm working now with the French embassy here in New Delhi, and we are doing this project. I'm in charge of the project of documenting the history of 20th century science between India and France, which is very nice. And in that, we are also doing a nationwide exhibition and a planetarium show. So hopefully, if we don't get into the trap of COVID again, you'll see a very nice exhibition coming up in several metropolitan cities, including Hyderabad, Delhi, Calcutta, Bombay, and Bangalore next year on history of science. And
my next question was, do you have any future plans? And you answered that already. So
yeah. So yeah,
I mean, is there?
I think what my future plan looks like is after this book on the neutrinos goes to print, I would like to, take a long break and actually work with and something that's going on already, but not at the pace that I would like to, on a multi-volume work on the history of science of India post-independence. I mean, primarily 20th and the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
So it would start with, somebody like Father Lafont in Calcutta, to explore the Bengal school of thought in science. From there, it moves to Bangalore, Ahmedabad, Delhi, Chandigarh, Lucknow, Kodaikanal, personal histories of people like Venu Bapu and Sarabhai and Birbal Sani. So it is a long project, and I'm really excited about it. But I'll do it at some point. That is something that I think would be, that is something that I look as my contribution to the country.
I mean, with the museums and the book, and now this other book, I'm sure we're all inspired as well. So thank you for providing such a huge source of inspiration for all of us. So with this, we come to the end of today's session. This is On Air with said Celestia, and thanks for tuning in to this live session. And thank you so much, Pranav, for taking the time to be with us today. I mean, I'm sure, I hope you had as much fun giving us knowledge as we had.
A very refreshing dialogue. The kind of future plans that I get asked are not the kind of future plans that I was asked on the interview. So I'm extremely happy.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. It was lovely. It was lovely. We should do it again, you know. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Certainly.
Thank you, sir.